Have you ever noticed that the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest? People mistake volume for confidence. They mistake anger for power. They mistake reactions for control. The truth is, the moment someone can predict your emotions, they can predict your decisions. And the moment they can predict your decisions, they've already taken something from you. Every insult becomes a button. Every compliment becomes a leash. Every argument becomes a trap waiting for you to step inside. Most people spend their lives trying to control the room. The dangerous ones learn to control themselves first. Silence is not weakness. It is the first sign of control over chaos. Most people misunderstand silence as emptiness, as if nothing is happening when words are not being thrown into the air. But silence is never empty. It is active. It is pressure building without noise. It is awareness sharpening without distraction. It is the mind observing everything while revealing nothing. In a world where everyone is competing to be heard, the one who chooses not to speak immediately gains a different kind of presence. Not loud presence, but heavy presence. The kind that makes others uncomfortable because they cannot read it, cannot interrupt it, cannot predict it. When you stay silent in moments where others expect reaction, you are no longer part of their rhythm. You are outside it, watching it break itself. Chaos feeds on response. Every insult thrown at you is not powerful by itself. It only becomes powerful when it enters you and changes your state. That is where most people lose control without realizing it. They think they are defending themselves, but in reality they are being guided. Guided into anger, into urgency, into words they did not plan to say. Silence cuts that chain. It interrupts the automatic loop between feeling and reaction. In that interruption, control is born, because now the situation is no longer happening to you. It is happening around you, while you remain untouched inside it. People underestimate how much information is revealed when they speak under pressure. The more emotional the response, the more exposed the structure behind it becomes. Fear leaks through tone. Ego leaks through speed. Insecurity leaks through justification. Silence removes that leakage completely. It gives nothing away, and when nothing is given away, nothing can be used against it. In rooms full of psychological games, silence becomes a shield that does not block attacks. It simply makes them irrelevant by refusing entry. There is also a deeper shift that happens when silence becomes intentional. It stops being a reaction and becomes a decision. That decision signals something powerful to others, even if they cannot explain it. It signals that your internal state is not dependent on external pressure. That signal changes how people approach you. Some become cautious, some become curious, some become uncomfortable because they realize they cannot easily influence you. And influence is what most interactions are built on. Even when disguised as conversation, silence forces others to reveal themselves. When you are not filling space with your reactions, the room starts to expose its own noise. People begin to overtalk, over-explain, overextend themselves just to fill the gap you created. In that gap, their patterns become visible, and once patterns are visible, they lose their power to manipulate you. Because manipulation depends on distraction, and silence removes distraction entirely. It is not about saying less. It is about no longer being owned by the impulse to respond. It is about standing still while everything around you tries to pull you into movement. And in that stillness, something shifts in perception. You are no longer just another voice in the room competing for space. You become the space itself, observing how others behave inside it, without giving them the comfort of knowing what you will do next. Your emotions are the only leverage others truly need against you. Not your strength. Not your intelligence, not your appearance, but the invisible current running through your reactions. The part of you that moves before thought catches up. People rarely control each other through force. Force is loud, obvious, and temporary. Real control happens in quieter ways, through small emotional triggers placed carefully into conversations, into arguments, into casual words that seem meaningless until they are not. The moment you feel something strongly, you are no longer fully steering yourself. Something else has entered the driver's seat, and it does not need permission. Anger, fear, pride, insecurity, desire, all of them become handles that someone else can pull if they learn where you are soft. And most people carry those handles openly without even knowing it, reacting instantly whenever someone presses the right combination of words or silence or attention. That reaction is the point where control shifts hands without a struggle, without awareness, without resistance strong enough to matter. Emotions are not the enemy. The lack of distance from them is. When you are inside your emotion, you cannot see the structure of what is happening. You are inside the fire, not observing the fire. In that state, everything feels urgent, everything feels personal, everything demands immediate response. And urgency is the perfect environment for manipulation to grow. Because in urgency, reflection disappears. The space between stimulus and response collapses. That collapse is where decisions are made for you instead of by you. Someone says the right phrase and suddenly your tone changes. Someone challenges your identity and suddenly your logic bends to defend it. Someone ignores you and suddenly your actions start chasing validation. It is not the event that controls you. It is the emotional attachment to the event that rewrites your behavior in real time. The strange part is how predictable emotions become once they are visible from the outside. A person who reacts quickly is already mapped. You can predict their next sentence by knowing what hurts them. You can guide their direction by knowing what they are afraid of losing. You can pull them into cycles simply by repeating the same emotional triggers with slight variation. Most people believe they are responding to situations, but they are actually responding to patterns of themselves being activated again and again. That is why emotional control is not about suppression, it is about separation. Creating distance between what you feel and what you do, so that the feeling exists but does not immediately become action. When that distance exists, something unusual happens. The world loses its grip on your timing. Insults no longer force instant replies. Praise no longer forces instant alignment. Provocation no longer guarantees movement. And when your timing becomes unpredictable, influence weakens. Because influence depends on rhythm. If someone can make you react within seconds, they control the rhythm of your decisions. But if you pause inside your own internal space, even briefly, the rhythm breaks. And once the rhythm breaks, leverage becomes unstable. People begin to miscalculate you. They expect heat and receive cold. They expect defense and receive observation. They expect emotion and receive nothing readable enough to use. In that unreadability, power quietly forms, not through aggression, not through dominance, but through emotional independence that removes the handles others once relied on without needing to announce it, without needing to prove it. Existing simply as a state where reactions no longer arrive on command. Reaction is surrender disguised as personality. Most people think reacting quickly makes them authentic, as if the speed of their emotions proves the honesty of their character. But in reality, reaction is often the moment where control quietly slips away. It looks like expression, it feels like individuality, but underneath it, it is usually impulse taking command before awareness has time to intervene. When someone provokes you and you immediately answer, when someone insults you and you instantly defend, when someone praises you and you instantly adjust your identity to match it, you are not demonstrating strength of self, you are revealing how easily your state can be rewritten by external input. That is not personality, that is responsiveness without resistance. And anything that can be moved that easily can also be directed that easily. The dangerous illusion is that reaction feels natural, so it feels right. But nature is not the same as mastery. A fire burns naturally, yet it destroys everything it touches without discrimination. Reaction operates the same way, automatic, immediate, uncontrolled, consuming whatever enters its path without asking whether it should. And in human interaction, this becomes predictable behavior. The more predictable your reactions are, the easier you are to influence. People do not need to understand you deeply to manipulate you. They only need to observe what breaks your calm. Once that is known, your reactions become tools in someone else's hands. Because every predictable response becomes a lever, there is a hidden cost in reacting too fast. Every instant response skips the space where observation could have existed. That space is where clarity forms, where context is weighed, where intention is separated from impulse. Without that space, you are not choosing your response, you are being carried by it. And what carries you is rarely concerned with outcome, it is concerned only with release. That is why reactive people often regret what they say, because what was said was not chosen, it was released. And what is released without choice cannot be controlled once it leaves. When reaction becomes habitual, identity starts to form around it. People begin to describe themselves using their triggers. I am someone who gets angry fast. I am someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect. I am someone who always speaks their mind. These statements feel like self-definition, but they are often just descriptions of what controls them. The irony is that what they believe to be personality is often just a collection of unfiltered responses to external pressure. And the more they defend this pattern, the more deeply it becomes part of them, until they confuse emotional volatility with authenticity. But there is another layer beneath this, one that most never notice. The moment you delay reaction, even slightly, something changes in the structure of power. A pause creates uncertainty in the other person's expectation. They prepared for a predictable outcome, but instead they receive space. In that space, their control weakens, because control depends on immediate feedback loops. If every action produces an instant reaction, the system remains stable for whoever is provoking it. But when that loop breaks, when response is delayed or absent, the system starts to lose its grip. Now the initiator no longer knows what they have triggered, and uncertainty replaces dominance in that uncertainty. Observation becomes possible. You begin to see not just what is being said, but why it is being said. You begin to notice patterns instead of moments. And patterns are where real understanding exists. Without reaction, you are no longer inside the interaction as a participant being pushed around by emotional currents. You are outside it, watching it unfold, while others continue to reveal themselves through the very reactions they think define them. The room doesn't change when you speak louder. It changes when you stop being predictable. Most people believe presence is volume. That influence is tied to how strongly you project yourself into space. They raise their voice, they sharpen their tone, they push their opinions harder, thinking intensity will bend the environment around them. But a room is not controlled by noise. It is controlled by expectation, and expectation is built on patterns. When people can predict what you will say, how you will react, and when you will respond, the room already knows your shape. It does not matter how loud that shape becomes, because it has already been categorized, already been mapped, already been mentally placed inside a box that no amount of volume can break. Predictability is the quiet loss of power. It does not announce itself. It does not feel like weakness at first. It feels like consistency, like reliability, like being understood. But understanding without uncertainty removes tension, and without tension there is no influence. People stop paying attention to what you will do next, because they already assume they know it. And once assumption replaces curiosity, your presence becomes background noise. Even if you are speaking at the center of the room, the mind stops tracking you because there is nothing left to decode. When someone becomes predictable, others begin to interact with the idea of them instead of the actual person. They stop listening to words and start anticipating patterns. Every sentence becomes expected before it is finished. Every reaction becomes rehearsed in the minds of those watching. And in that space, influence quietly dissolves, because influence requires attention, and attention requires uncertainty. Without uncertainty, people do not lean in. They lean away mentally while still appearing present. Physically, unpredictability is not chaos. It is controlled deviation from expectation. It is the refusal to lock yourself into a single emotional rhythm that others can exploit. When your responses vary, when your silence appears where speech is expected, when your agreement appears where resistance is assumed, when your calm appears where emotion is predicted, you disrupt the mental model others have built around you. And in that disruption they lose comfort. Because comfort comes from knowing how something behaves. When behavior becomes unreadable, the mind is forced to pay attention again, forced to recalibrate, forced to stop assuming and start observing. This recalibration is where power begins to shift. In a predictable person, others feel safe to lead the interaction because outcomes are already known. In an unpredictable presence, others become cautious, even slightly disoriented. Because their internal scripts no longer apply. They start adjusting themselves instead of adjusting you. And the moment that reversal happens, the dynamic of control changes direction without a single explicit confrontation. You are no longer responding to the room begins responding to you. There is also a deeper effect that unpredictability creates. It introduces mental effort into every interaction. People now have to think before they speak, calculate before they act, because they cannot rely on your automatic reaction anymore. That added effort creates hesitation, and hesitation slows dominance. In social environments, speed often decides influence. Whoever reacts fastest usually controls the flow. But when your reactions are no longer guaranteed, speed loses its advantage, and others lose their rhythm around you. In that loss of rhythm, something subtle happens. The room no longer feels like it is being led by anyone else. It starts to orbit uncertainty itself, and you become the source of that uncertainty, not by force, not by confrontation, but by refusing to be easily written into a predictable script that others can recite before you even speak. Mastering yourself makes every opponent lose their map of you. Most battles are not fought in actions, they are fought in understanding. People do not need to defeat your strength if they already understand your patterns. They do not need to overpower your voice if they already know how it bends under pressure. They do not need to control your situation if they can predict how you will respond to it. Every person you face is silently trying to build a map of you, a mental structure that explains your reactions, your triggers, your limits, your emotional thresholds. Once that map is complete, you are no longer unknown territory. You become navigable, and anything that can be navigated can eventually be exploited without force. Just direction self-mastery disrupts that mapping process. When you control yourself, when your emotions do not spill instantly into action, when your reactions are not consistent enough to be studied, the map never stabilizes. Others attempt to draw it, but lines do not connect. Patterns fail to repeat. Expected reactions fail to appear, and without repetition, understanding collapses. The mind cannot build a reliable model of something that refuses to behave consistently under pressure. That uncertainty creates distance between you and their perception of control. They begin to realize that what they thought they understood about you was only partial, sometimes even wrong, and that realization weakens their confidence in predicting you further. People rely heavily on psychological shortcuts. If someone reacts angrily once, they expect anger again. If someone submits once, they expect submission again. If someone stays calm under pressure, they expect calm every time pressure appears. These shortcuts become mental maps, and those maps are used in every interaction that follows. But self-mastery removes shortcuts. It replaces them with variation, controlled silence, unexpected restraint, or delayed expression that does not fit into previous categories. And when categories fail, prediction fails. When prediction fails, control loses its foundation. The moment someone cannot predict you, they are forced into observation instead of assumption. Observation is slower, more careful, more uncertain. It demands attention in real time rather than relying on memory of past behavior. That shift alone changes the balance of interaction. Instead of you adapting to their expectations, they begin adapting to your unpredictability. And adaptation is always a sign that influence has shifted direction. The one who adjusts is the one who is no longer fully in control of the structure of engagement. Self-mastery also removes emotional access points. When your internal state is stable, external pressure cannot easily locate a weak point. Insults do not automatically trigger escalation. Praise does not automatically trigger dependency. Silence does not automatically trigger discomfort. Each attempt to map your emotional structure returns incomplete data, and incomplete data is not useful for control. It creates uncertainty in those who try to read you, because every attempt produces a different result than expected. That inconsistency becomes frustrating for those who rely on emotional predictability to engage with others over time. This creates a shift in perception. You stop being seen as a simple personality with defined actions, and instead become a system that cannot be easily decoded. And systems that cannot be decoded are treated differently. People become more careful with what they say, more hesitant with how they approach, more aware that every attempt to push a reaction may fail or produce something unfamiliar. That hesitation slows their influence, because influence depends on confidence in outcome at the deepest level. Self-mastery is not about being unfeeling or distant. It is about refusing to let others complete a version of you in their mind that can be used against you. It is about keeping the map unfinished, denying closure, denying certainty, and existing in a state where understanding is always slightly out of reach. No matter how many times someone thinks they have figured you out,